The reason of hijab is identity. Is when I walk and there's another Muslim person, know that I'm Muslim. Is when something happened to me as a woman, there is a man there who's Muslim, or a group of Muslim men or women, know this is our girl. We need to stand up for her. It is identity. It's a connection. When I came here to Canada, and I have another friend who's Muslim as well, and she was not wearing hijab. And I was the one wearing hijab. I'll be walking in Toronto. I see another Muslim girl, and she would say, Assalamu alaikum, and she would just smile. And the first time I was like, does she know me? Right? And I just landed in this country. Am I beautiful? What's happening here? Of course I am. I was thinking to myself, what's going on? Then I realized it's a pattern in recognizing ourselves and Muslim people and connecting together in a Western world that at some point it's hard for us as women to be there with our identity. So it's some sort of support that was so beautiful. Some would be like, how are you, sister? And it would be good. How are you? It would be like a 5-second interaction that's very beautiful and had this fuzzy, warming feeling in my heart. And my other friend was like, how do you know all of these women? I was like, I don't know them. I just joined.
Right.
I joined by existing as my identity in this country.
Welcome back to Blessings, my friends. I would love to introduce you to a friend of mine today. She is a writer and a storyteller who lives in Toronto, Canada. She is the host of The Lemon Narrative, a podcast where she holds high-level conversations with people to showcase their stories. She's a selfless soul who also works with autistic children and has faced some serious challenges with her health. This summer, she's the co-director of marketing for the exciting first annual Muslim Literary Festival in Toronto. She's witty, charismatic, and she's a very deep thinker, which I love because we all know I don't like small talk. I like the deep thinking. She's the kind of person you could be completely honest with, and she will never judge you. She's interested in people and in the world and in making it better through human conversation, connection, and storytelling. Welcome, Sabreen, to the show.
Wow. Thank you, Mitzi. Wow. I just fell in love with myself while you're describing all these awesome things. Thank you very much for seeing me through this lens. I am honored to be here. You know how much I love you and I enjoy talking to you. You've been in my podcast as well, one of my favorite talks ever. I'm honored to be here and excited to have this conversation with you and to meet everyone, your audience.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited that you're here because you are just an amazing person to talk to. And so I know the conversation is going to be excellent. But when I was on your podcast, it's interesting because I was going through a health issue. And the night that I was on your podcast, I was not feeling well at all. And so I felt like I wasn't at my best. And you were so gracious at making me feel like I was doing a good job and appreciating me, that I really loved that you were able to hold that space for me. And I wanted to let you know how much I appreciated that.
Thank you. I honestly, I just thought you were great, and I love the conversation so much. I think the energy itself and the fact that we were honest and we're talking about things that feed our souls, both of us, and very important to us, and experiences that we wanted the world to know. I think that itself set the energy of the conversation and how we felt about it. And I hope you're feeling better right now.
I am. I'm feeling good right now. And because I know you've been through some challenges yourself, you can understand how it feels when you're dealing with something that's chronic or debilitating in some way that's been visible to other people. And that's how it is for me. Like there are things that go on sometimes that no one can see, but I feel them. And I think it's the same for you, right?
It is. And for the audience, Mitzi and we just met in Toronto like a month ago or something.
In person.
In person. And I was so excited. With almost 8 hours. We sat there almost 8 hours, a group of a storyteller. It was phenomenal. One of the best in-person meetings I've had in a while. And I do remember, if you don't mind, me saying that I do remember you feeling at some point not feeling well. And I sensed it right away. And I'm not sure if everyone did, but because I was in your shoes, and I'm always in these shoes. No, I never took it off. I'm not gonna lie. For the audience to know that I am kidney transplant patient, or like fighter, survivor, whatever term you want to describe yourself if you're like me. But for me, it's just the fact that this is something I live with. It became part of my identity. And I wouldn't say there are limitations. I would say I know when to use my energy and when to sit down and read. Right? It is the fact that we're pretty young, in my opinion. And I think people want to go for hours and talking and having fun and etc. For us, we can't go all these hours because we have an energy, we reserve it. As simple as that. So
Yeah.
I don't think people like, if you're not in that, you really need to be on high level of empathy to understand what we're going through. And we're always thankful for the people who support us. So in the meeting, I did notice that, and I was feeling the same. But the conversation was so good and everyone was so amazing. We just wanted to stay.
I
Um,
know.
and yeah, it is part of our life. We love it. We don't hate it. We just need to appreciate what we have. It's a blessing, right?
That's right. Yeah. And for people who deal with any sort of condition, whether it be a physical condition or something like anxiety that kicks in when you are overtaxed, because that is definitely what happened after you go a
Mm-hmm.
long time, many hours, it becomes too much. And your body starts to tell you when it needs a rest. And everyone should be able to tune into that. Even if you don't have anything going on that's chronic, just tune in to your
Mm-hmm.
body
Mm-hmm.
telling you when to rest. So, yes, absolutely. I
Agree with
want to
us.
dig into your story for sure, but I do want to start out with a big question for you. What do you want others to know about approaching conversations with people who are very much the same, but also different from us? How can we be curious and get into good conversations so that we can make connections in a way that everybody feels like safe and comfortable doing it?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, from my personal experience, when talking to people and when to realize I want to go on with this conversation or end it, right? Because
Mm,
you have a lot of conversation with people who ask you, or either like at some point you just there's trauma associated with chronic illness. I'm not going to hide that. So at some point you get triggered and you speak, and some people they're like, "What's wrong with her?" So I think the big factor for me is I am speaking with someone who doesn't have this source of pity towards me. They're
mm,
not looking at you like, oh, poor soul. And you can see it even if they don't, you can feel it even if they don't show some sort of facial expression, someone who's very empathic. And people who go through tremendous pain, in my opinion, become very aware of other people energy and feelings, right? So in my opinion, the thing that from my personal experience is I do not like pity, because I think everyone in this life is going through something, whether it's physical, it's mental, it's at work, it's a relationship, it's a parental, it's a past, it's an expat who live in a different city. There's so many variations of what the challenge is that actually give us a little bit push in life, right? And in my opinion, it's just an opportunity for you to learn. It might be painful, but for me, it's an opportunity to learn. So coming from a place of pity, thinking the other person needs your help, etc. At some point, they don't need help. They might need help, but maybe it's just they want to let you know this is what we're going through, and at some point in our conversation or our work together, whatever it is, we might need either accommodation or just extra time to give us task. There are various ways of being an ally, right? So when we bring this conversation, it's either educational, right? Or I am talking to a friend that I want them to know that I'm not going to be available for 6 hours, right? I
mhm.
can do 3 hours, and maybe we can schedule the task in 2 days or in 2 weeks, right? At the end of the day, in my opinion, tasks don't end. You finish one, you go to the next one. This comes into work or any type of relationship, even friendship, going out and having fun. So I love when people are coming from a place of understanding not a place of pity or a place of, wow, you're a superhuman. Because I know I'm not a superhuman. I'm not. I went through the pain. I cried. I asked myself the question, why me? I'm only in my 20s. I have so much to do. I saw my friends getting married and doing their masters, and I'm just stuck in this bed. So I had a normal reaction to everything. So I don't consider myself as a hero. I just consider myself as a human being who went through an experience that was painful at some point and then realized the opportunity for them in that experience, right? Even if it's painful. So when a person talks with me, I love understanding. I love them figuring it out, what we call an aha moment in my story, how they can relate to it, because every story is a human experience. Doesn't matter where you are, how you look like, what's your religion, where do you live in, all these experiences are connected together. The most weird experience someone told me, and I had no idea how to connect to it. Maybe 2 days later, I figured out the connection, right? So I look for the connection and place of understanding. In my opinion, this is how we can approach this from my personal experience.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you gave us so much there. First of all, I love what you said about approaching people. I take what you said to mean that you approach people from a level playing field. We're just at the same. I'm not better or worse. I'm not sicker or more well. I'm not richer or poorer. We're all, if we approach one another at the level of just human
Yes.
equality as human beings, then we can have a real conversation. And I love that. You're absolutely right about that. Whether it's you're speaking to someone and you're curious about something about their life, you can have a great conversation if you are putting yourself in a place where you're at the same level. I love
Yes.
that. Okay.
Yes. You're not looking down, you're not looking up. You're
Right.
just there trying to understand and asking the right questions.
Right. And that's, I think what that comes from is being able to have conversations with the goal of understanding one another rather than coming from a place of ego in the conversation. Conversation is an exchange, it's like
Mm-hmm.
a dance you're doing with someone.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my God. That's so true. It's a dance, and usually you can either choose to have two left feet, or actually doing it right by asking the right questions and by understanding that you two are just human beings.
Yeah. And trying to
That's
feel
about
the
it.
rhythm together,
Yeah.
trying to find the rhythm with someone.
Mhm.
And sometimes you don't find it. There might be someone who
That's
you
okay.
just can't dance with, and that's all right. But
Yeah,
like you
that's fine.
said, knowing when to keep the conversation going or to bring it to an end. And you can do that very politely. That doesn't have to be a negative experience. If you know
That's very
that you're
true.
not wanting to continue in a certain vein in the conversation or even have a conversation at all. But
Yeah.
yes, I do love though what you're doing. And I also do the same thing. The idea that we can have open conversations with one another about things about which we're curious. If you see someone wearing a hijab like you do, if
Mm-hmm.
you see someone who is in a wheelchair
Mm-hmm.
because they're not able to walk, if you see someone who has something that appears physically different,
Mm-hmm.
that it's okay to be curious about that if you're approaching it from a level playing field.
Yes, address the elephant in the room.
That's right.
Don't be scared of it. Maybe the other person would tell you the story and would love for you to know the story, right? And no, I wouldn't say what question to ask per se, because sometimes you might ask the wrong question and the other person would understand where you're coming from according to where you grew up, etc. Right? Let's say for me, wearing hijab, there are two type of questions. Are you forced to wear this, or why are you wearing it? And I'm not going to lie, it depends on the person, and how they tell the questions is how I react to it, because none of these questions are offensive to me.
And
If
we get to
someone,
choose whether we are offended by something or not. So I think we talked about this too, the idea of that we have that choice, the
Mhm,
choice to be offended or to not be offended. And
we
when
do.
someone asks us about something, it can be an opportunity for understanding to take place.
Mhm. Exactly. That's how I think about it. Again, what I said earlier, everything is an opportunity for me. And when someone asks me a question that might seem offensive to other people and I choose not to, usually the goal in my brain is, why did this person think that? What kind of experience led them through this? Was it just media, or did they meet someone who was forced to wear hijab? Because let's face it, some people are, right? Am I going to deny that? No. All these are valid experiences, and I rather talk about them than denying them. I rather, like, in my community, and like I see this everywhere, we turn into a defensive mode. No, I don't represent that. No, I do. I do. I represent that. There are people who are using my religion, the way I look and everything, in all the wrong places, all the wrong ways. And there are people who are doing it right. And this happens in every culture, in every religion. This is an ongoing pattern that we see in our history. So instead of hiding it, imagine this vision. Your house is so messy, and you're inviting a friend, and you decided to shove everything in one shelf or like in one cupboard. At the end of the day, this cupboard is going to break. You might forget about it, and the house might look good, but it will break at some point, and then you will have more mess to deal with. So I rather talk about all these experiences and addressing them. I might not understand it myself. I might not understand someone who was forced to wear hijab because I didn't have that experience, but it is part of my religion. It's part of the experience of the religion other women are facing around this world. So I rather talk about it. I rather have this conversation with people and know where did they come across it than just be like, no, no. So I rather choose that and understand where are these people coming from. And just to refer to that, not every conversation is going to be pleasant, and not every conversation is going to end with you winning the conversation, because that's not the point of it. The point is having the conversation.
Absolutely. Just because something is difficult doesn't mean it's negative.
Yeah. Even in a film, because I like screenwriting, when the ending is sad, it's just in 2 hours. Maybe the next chapter in that character life is beautiful. So maybe this conversation will end here in a negative way, right? And that person will be like, oh, no, you're this and that. And me trying to understand where they're coming from does not work, because at the end of the day, I'm not like the best conversation person in the world. I just try to understand things. And for me, a conversation is an adventure, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the end result would be negative, but I left pieces in their brains to go figure out, right?
There's some understanding that can continue to take place.
Yes, without me. And that's where ego left the conversation, right? Because your ego tells you to win the argument. But the point is not the argument, winning the argument. The point is being there in the argument. And whatever the result is, it's okay. That's how I see it.
I love that you just said that that understanding can take place without you in the conversation anymore.
Yes.
That you don't have to have, and we don't always get closure in a conversation.
Closure is a fairy tale in everything in life. It's what, like, all the positive conversation mindsets are telling you, get your closure. Sometimes you don't get closure, and what you get is the lesson, the opportunity, the experience, and you learn from that and you move on. I think us holding into closure closes other open doors for us, other conversations, other experiences.
So maybe if something doesn't give you that quote closure that you think as you define it, it's because you're continuing to learn, and life is continuing to present you with more situations to learn. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Oh my gosh, you are speaking my language. That is so beautiful.
I'm happy I do.
Oh, I love that so much, because we're all looking for closure on things, and we think we're entitled to it. We get angry or we get upset, or
did you earn it? You didn't earn it.
Closure comes from you. Like, the only place you can get closure is inside.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from someone else, right?
You surrender to it. Yeah. You surrender. And this is when you get it, right? And if you don't surrender, you're just going to keep to have the same pattern of experience that's going to frustrate you more and more. So the only way for you is to get it within, just like what you said, right? And this is earning it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you chose. It's like choosing to be offended, choosing to get the closure or not. It's your choice.
It is. Everything is a choice, isn't it? Except for where you're born. So let's go into that. I
I
want to
didn't
talk a
choose
little
that.
bit about your story. So, can you tell us a little bit about your early life? Where were you born, and what was life like for you when you were a small child?
Okay. So I had a very exciting life, in my opinion. I was actually born in Russia, Moscow, and my dad did his undergrad and graduate till PhD in Russia. So I am like Russian born by born. The first language I spoke was Russian, which I forgot right now because no one is the only person who spoke Russian very well was my dad, and I was at native level. Even my mom, who spoke a little bit of Russian, couldn't understand me. And like when I met my dad's friend recently, they tried to speak to me, and they were like, "When you were a little baby, we were jealous of you." Because you master the language to the point with the pronunciation, with the street slang, whatever the kids are saying. And we come and we talk to you, and you're like, "What is your daughter saying?" And I'm like, "Dad, why didn't you speak to me?" But at the end of the day, I don't remember actually, it's always changed. It's 4 years old. We moved back to Sudan. This is where originally my parents are from, which is like basically my genetics and my heritage is from Sudan, which is the north part right now, if you look at the map. And we moved to Sudan. And from Sudan, I think we spent a little bit time, less than a year in Egypt. And then we moved to Yemen. By the time I was almost 6 years old, we moved back to Sudan, in which I got my elementary education. Now, Yemen was one of the most dearest countries to my heart because, oh gosh, I don't want to cry,
Oh,
but I love this country very much. The food is great because I'm a foodie. The food is amazing. And we have a connection in my family with Yemen because my grandmother was married to a Yemeni person, had a child, which is may God bless all their souls. They passed away, all of them right now. But my uncle is Yemeni, and his children are to this day live in Yemen. So Yemen is a very beautiful country. I just remember the road trips because I'm a fan of road trips. I remember the road trips between the mountains. It felt like a roller coaster for me as a child. We lived in a house that has grapes, apples, probably apricots, like lemons, since we're talking lemon narrative, lemons, guava. Like our house in Yemen had everything, right? And I saw this because people, when they talk Yemen, they think it's all mountains. So, and the architecture is very beautiful. So it's a very beautiful country with rich culture, and my connection with it is very emotional. So I lived a little bit there. I had many great experiences. At some point, I was in a road trip, told my mom that I can see God. She went crazy. You're like, Sabrina, you can't see God. I was like, but I can see God.
can you
Right.
tell what's the story? Can you tell us that story?
Sure. My dad would always drive us to my uncle's house. And at some point, we lived very far because my dad is a vet, by the way. So we lived in a chicken farm. It's an industrial chicken farm. So the doctor, they call it animal doctor in Arabic. So he would have the fanciest house in that farm, which is the house I told you about that we had like
Oh,
black grapes, green grapes, apples, apricots, and
wow.
lemons. And we even had like tomatoes and stuff. I just remember that house. I loved it so much. And my dad would drive us from this house to my uncle's house, who used to live in Sana'a, the capital. My uncle is a psychologist, actually. No, a psychiatric here in Canada. There's a difference.
Yeah.
He has a really great experience with that. Maybe some other time we'll talk about this. But we will be driving. My dad will be driving, and there are a lot of mountains. And I just wonder. I just would be sitting by the window and wonder. And at some point, I looked at my mom and said, "I can see God." And she said, "You cannot see God." Because in Islam, that's not a thing you say. We don't see God. It's one of the things. We don't see God. We don't call it Allah. For context, Allah is the Arabic word for God, and we use it because God in English can be plural, right? But Allah cannot be plural. That's the reason why we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I went to my mom and said, "I see Allah." And she said, "You cannot see. You cannot." And I kept resisting on this for a couple of months. And it was never resolved with my parents. But looking back at that, I was so persistent on the fact that I can see God. And looking back, someone asked me what we were seeing, and I
Yeah.
just thought of light.
Okay.
As a child, I was just seeing bright light. I wouldn't say like a moon, but it's just light. And I just thought to myself, this is what God is, right?
Hmm.
That's the story, basically. I don't like saying it more, but I loved how I was trying to connect when I was a child and wonder. And I knew, looking back at this story, I just knew that I had questions,
Hmm.
and that's a good thing. Even growing up, after connecting it to this, when I went back to Sudan, when we went back to Sudan, I had this issue. I'm not someone who likes to sleep. Everyone would take naps in my house, and I wouldn't, right? I had so much energy. And because both of my uncles are doctors, and my aunts are actually, they studied English literature. And I didn't speak English. I did not speak English and read English fluently till I was in my university. But at that time, I didn't have anything to do. I'm not sporty. So I would just go through the books. And we had a book, the translation of the best English literature,
Hmm.
that had Hamlet in it.
Mm.
And I read Hamlet by the age of 9. And when I tell you how mad I was at that princess, she had all the dresses. All the dresses. Who cares about Hamlet and her father? That was my interpretation. I'm like, you're a princess. You have dresses. You live in a palace. Who cares about Hamlet and his mind? That's how I thought about it when I was like 9 years old. Kept reading it till I read it recently at like probably 22, which is a different experience, by the way. But that's what happened when we moved to Sudan and got my elementary education there. And as soon as I learned to read, I've been reading everything. Even I would go through my uncle's medical books, right? And they have illustration in which the first time I opened it, I was like, oh my God, there's a naked person. And I ran. That's,
Oh,
why would they have a naked person is there? I didn't understand what medicine is. But
yeah.
all these experiences, reading literature. I read Treasure Island and Hamlet at such a young age. I wasn't, it's the age where it's just a story. You don't
Right.
understand more than that. You're like, why are you angry at the pirate? Just take the money. That age where things don't make sense. Why are these people complicating it? Just be simple. Hamlet doesn't love you, but marry the other prince. So stuff like that. So that was my experience as a child. Of course, I was an overachiever in school due to my reading. I always had to be the first in class. My parents also, my mom in particular, my family is a family of my grandmother. She loves education.
Hmm.
And I grew up in my grandmother's house, by the way, very spoiled. Imagine living in the grandmother house. If I said I don't like eggplant, a new meal will be prepared for me. Then don't eat eggplant. So I grew up in that, very loved. My dad was traveling around due to work and his choices in life. So I was away from him for 7 years when I lived in Sudan, but he was amazing for 7 years in which I was loved by my grandmother, my aunts and uncles. My mom would come and go because of her work as well. But they made sure I got good education, be loved, and get good food.
Hmm.
I was told all the time how smart I was, but there's when you I visit this as a person right now, there's a lot of ego involved for a child who just wants to be with their parents.
Mm.
I think I appreciate this experience right now, but then I was all the time annoyed that all the kids have their parents with them and I don't. Even if they live in the family house and a grandmother or an uncle with them, they would have their parents. And there's the father who would be living abroad to bring money, but the mother is there. And my
Hmm.
mom would come and go. She wasn't like absent all the time. But as an older sister or oldest sister, she would talk to me about taking care of my siblings. And then at the age of 9 is a big age for me. At the age of 9, my parents divorced, and that was kept a secret. I was the only one who knew because they were trying to fix it. And then by the age of 11, I think everyone knew. That was another change in status, I would say, because I went from the kid was the smartest school, getting the first, and her dad is a doctor. Everyone in her family is a doctor. Her mom is this beautiful, achieving woman. And then now something is wrong with the family. There's a divorce, right? So that was a loss of a status that I did not even realize since I grew up. People just started. This is where I hate pity, because there are two types of people: the people who pitied me and the people who just expect me to fail, because they thought divorce is not an easy experience on on children.
No.
It's not, right? That was such a young age for me as well. So they just expect me to do bad in school, to behave bad in general. And in my podcast, the teaser was talking about the first day people in school knew, and I didn't know because I was living in a protective shell by my family of how amazing I am as a person. I wasn't aware that I had this status that everyone looks up to. That's why I don't like statuses. I don't like appearances. I have issues with appearances. That's why I love conversation, because I can look at you and think all thoughts about you. But the moment you speak, this is your truth. So what happened that day is I had an assignment in which I was supposed to recite something, and I sneezed during the recitation. And so when you sneeze, you do this or this, and you say Alhamdulillah, and the other person's like, it's like a sort of a bless you situation. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. And then I went back to my recitation, right? And the teacher was like, you didn't do your thing. You didn't memorize. It's the first time I was questioned. Because all
you
this
sneezed.
Because that's what I thought. No, here's the thing. I was protected. I was not questioned before that. Everything I did, even if I did wrong, there was an explanation done for me by the teachers. I didn't know that, but it was my status that was protecting me. And that day I lost that status. Everyone knew that there's a divorce in the family. So I was accused of that. And I was confused, literally, because I didn't have what I'm telling you right now is me analyzing the situation. But then I was just an 11-year-old. And the teacher telling me I didn't do something as an overachiever, A+ student is so bizarre. I was never questioned. I took it hard. I looked at her and I said, I will stand here and recite everything for you. But she refused to listen. And it was one of the few times I got punished by beating, which I hate violence. I have a very sensitive hands, I would say.
Yeah.
For me, it was like, it wasn't just the pain from being hit in your hand, it was the shame as well as a child, because I had this status of being a student. I don't get punished for not doing things, right? I have this, everyone knows who I am in the school, basically. I was the one who's emceeing all the morning programs as well. So they know who I am. And my name was the only name in school. Everyone else had someone named Sarah or Ala or Fatima or Aisha. It was the only Sabreen in the school. At least it's a unique name at that time, and still pretty unique at some point. But so that just, I took it hard. And I thought this teacher is crazy. In my brain, I thought she's crazy. Something is wrong with her. At the end of the day, she asked me to come to her office. This is when she said, I don't want your parents' divorce to affect you. And this is when a light bulb came to my brain. I was like, that was happening. And I was even more confused because I kept the secret for 2 years. For 2 years, they were divorced. No one knew. The moment everyone knew, everything shifted for me. I was expected. And this had a lot of pressure on me because I was pressured my parents to achieve anyways, and to prove to the world that this divorce didn't affect us as kids. And then I took it in me to do that as well because I went through this experience, right? And I think it's different because I see it in my brother and me. My brother reaction is, this happened, he continued belaying and doing what he wants to do. I think later when we had the conversation, we went through a lot of things I wasn't even aware of. And I thought to myself, wow, you're lucky. I wish I was not aware.
Oh,
because I was.
yeah. Are you the
And
oldest? You're the oldest child in your family?
yes, yes, yes. But going back to where I lived after that, it was United Arab Emirates, Dubai. And did some of my high school. I graduated with my high school diploma, went back to Sudan for a med school, left med school to come to Canada, did my undergrad here, and now I live here, Toronto.
Wow.
There's
All
so many
right.
stories within this story, within
Okay.
where I live.
Yes.
That's
This is, I'm so struck by that story. First of all,
I know because you're a teacher.
I think there's just such vast differences across the world in what happens in schools that we just don't know. I think there were times in America where children would have corporal punishment, where they
Mm-hmm.
would be paddled or hit with a ruler. You hear about in Catholic schools that being very
Mm-hmm.
popular and things like this, but never in the public school for me. Did I
Mm-hmm.
experience that? Except I'll have to say though, now that I'm thinking about it, when I was teaching in Philadelphia, they did use some corporal punishment. They used to make the children who were misbehaving stand in the corner of the room holding a stack of books and squatting down. They would say, you have to go squat. They would make them squat holding a stack of books for as long as
Mm-hmm.
they could. And that was in the 80s, the 1980s. So that was still going on here, but the idea of someone, it just crushes me to know that I can picture you as a little girl doing your best, not having made a mistake at all, just sneezing, and then someone hits you. Was it with a stick on your hands?
Yeah, some
Are
sort of
you
a stick.
are you comfortable talking about it?
Yeah, it wasn't looking back. I just have to say that was the norm,
Yeah.
right? All the
Yeah.
kids that were like some teachers won't hit us, and some teacher would be like, you got two mistakes, you get two hits, right? So you can do the best later. And there were forms of punishment. It just for me, I always witnessed it. I wasn't the person experiencing it,
Yeah.
but it was the norm. I can't just speak for everyone whether they're traumatized or not. I can speak for myself that I don't like being hit. I don't like violence in general. I don't even like action movies. I watch with my brothers and father. That's about it. But what happened, it for me, I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't the pain, it was more the shame
Yeah.
because I don't go through this. It was painful. I just put my hands up like that and got hit. It wasn't a stick. I don't know what it's called, to be honest. It was like the incident, it was the in your yard, usually have these pipes you used to use for your plants, for watering your plants. Some people have them. It's made of plastic and they're
Okay.
pipes. They're made of plastic and they're
Okay.
very small.
Okay.
It's very specific to that region. I have never
Okay.
seen it here. But it looks like the usual black pipes you have for water. But those
Okay.
one are thick. This one are very small. It is painful because it is soft,
Uh,
so sometimes goes around I don't know, it's just it is painful, I'm not gonna lie, but I wasn't hit 10 times, it was just one hit. And
oh,
notice I said just, right,
yeah.
because I've seen more. That being said, this happens in the 90s. Now it's not the common practice in Sudan because things are different. Things are
Hmm.
very different, right? I'm hoping they're not the same. I still hear stories, but it's a common practice and I hope it stops at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, it was just the shame
Yeah.
associated with it.
Oh, I'm sorry you went through that, but it must give you an interesting piece of fuel for introspection to look at that situation and other situations and that whole period of your life around your parents' divorce
Mm,
and then moving. So when you moved to Dubai,
mm.
who were you living with at that time?
I was living with my father. I was living with my dad, and it was living with my dad after 7 years of not seeing him or living with him. Or and to every daughter, a father is the hero, right? So it
Hmm.
was rediscovering my dad for the image I had in Yemen, because that was my last like, living interaction with him. It's different when you talk to someone on the phone and when you live. When you have a father figure that comes home every night, it's different from having him over the phone. So there was a lot of clashes in terms of how we do things. And I'm not going to lie, we were spoiled. We weren't held accountable for a lot of house chores by my grandmother because she just loved us. We're the grandchildren, and she wanted to feed us all the time. And in my mom's house, it's all about education. They pamper you to have the grades and to focus only on your education. And that's something I was, again, had a disconnection with in school with other kids, because I wouldn't understand why someone didn't do their homework, because I didn't understand that some people don't have the luxury I had. They had to help in the house. Or, for example, a huge luxury I had growing up was having aunts who are teachers. Because in summer, my aunt would sit down and read everything with me. I would have the books before the other kids have the books. They were very serious about my education, right? So I would be I would have tests at home. She worked very hard on us, my brother and I. I was taught how to sit down and study for 5, 6 hours because I didn't have the choice. She stayed there with me. So this is like tremendous effort that I did not realize other children didn't have. I even have a funny story in one of my friends visiting me to, to play during the week. That was like a forbidden thing in I didn't have access to that. I only played one day a week. I only visited people one day because all the time I was studying. And she visited me, and my aunt looked at her. She said, "Did you memorize the poems that you were supposed to?" She said, "Yes." So she sat her down and asked her to all of them. She tested her on every single poem with the meanings and definitions. And my friend failed. Oh. She called her mom and she said, "Your kid did not study for the test tomorrow. They're staying until they figured it out with Sabreen." And that girl stayed in my house till 10 p.m. Oh. And to this date, she wouldn't visit me if my aunt is there. She told everyone how I study. I'm very grateful for my aunt because to this day, I can still sit and do my work for 3, 4 hours. And everyone is like, "How do you just focus? How do you just sit?" Because I was taught how to, because that's something you teach people, right? So as I was grateful for that. But for example, I wouldn't do my bed because I was told that's not my job. I wouldn't, for example, wash the spoon after I used it because it wasn't my job. It wasn't my job to even think about when people are done with food and there's a desert. It wasn't my job to go help with that, right? So my mom would tell me I would be told to do that, but my grandmother always covered for us. She would say, "This is not right. Don't do this." So you will stop doing it if it's wrong. But she would do it for you. Like she would make sure that you don't make more mess. So if the place is good, you don't make more mess. But it's not your job to clean the mess. So that was the clash between my dad and us. Because he was like, "You need to hold yourself accountable. Do your rooms again." And then we had rooms, right? When we moved to Dubai. That was a different thing from living in Sudan. I lived with him until both my parents had their own families. And then it was living with my dad during the school year and then visiting my mom in summer in Sudan. Okay. So that's how it worked.
You mentioned that when you moved to Dubai, you had rooms for the first time, that this was different from your life in Sudan. Can you tell us what you mean by that? You had a room and you didn't have a room in Sudan?
Yeah. The houses in Sudan are very big. And the type of houses would have a couple of rooms that not everyone has their own room usually. It's just a group. Girls are together, boys are together. And the time I was living when I was a child, we didn't have ACs. It wasn't a thing. So at some point we would have special beds for the yards to sleep in at night because it would be too suffocating inside the house. So having your own room was more like having your own just cupboards for your clothing, where you store your personal stuff, where you change. So everything is shared, but you're not self-aware of it because that's how things are. Right. So you would know that this area where the boys are sleeping, this is where the girls are sleeping, this is where everyone meets. And this is where this is the living room that is for guests, because some guests would come from, like I lived in a city, some guests would come from the village to have medical appointments. And everyone, we have big families that's all connected. So you, as someone who comes from a village or a small city that doesn't have the same, let's say that city doesn't have kidney dialysis. And the person has to stay for a month or so to get help. So they would have some sort of a cousin, a far cousin, or like a grandfather's house that's in the city, and the people living in it know this is their relative. So they would have a room. We call it a living room, and that's, I think there was a joke about it in the Middle East that Sudanese people have beds in their living room. But the point of beds in the living room was when visitors come and stay, they have a comfortable place in. And even if they're staying for a day, they can come and take a nap. And that living room it's like a guest house here, but it will be part of the house it's like a guest house. But most houses, not everyone has a privilege of having a big house. Some people, this is their living room. It would have the chair set and then some beds for the guests who will come, either stay the night or stay like just for a nap. And then you will have to feed them. So it serves multiple purposes. So for us who live in the house, we would have areas rather than rooms. I never thought of it. I never thought that, oh, I want my own room. I want doors to be closed, because it wasn't a thing. It was not a thing for doors to be closed between us. We're all just so connected together that why would you sit alone? Unless you want to sleep. You know what I mean? Or you have work, right? We always know what the other person is up to. When a person, for example, if like right now I have my room and everything, but everyone in the house knows I have a podcast recording. So they stay quiet. Everyone knows my business. But at some point it's annoying. But it's just the feeling that you have so much support in your life. Right? And you're not scared of the outside world because you have a strong foundation of people. Even if they know their business, they know it for good reasons. They know it because they will be there for you. They know it because they know you're out there doing this and that. And you have the time, you told them where you're going, etc. And this is usually understood in the Western world as control. It's understood as backwarding thinking, right? But it's warm. It gives a fuzzy warm feeling because I am capable of doing both, right? Because after I lived in UAE, I had the privilege of having my own room and everything associated with it, and sitting there and studying. And because of the relationship with my stepmom, I stayed a lot in my room. So that was a shift in your life. And this is something I hold dear in my heart, that I had these two experiences. My own room that I had to clean, and then actually, let me paint the picture when it's like the weather is very good. We just had rain, and the smell of the rain with the dirt and everything. And you have the beds and everyone in their bed, and we're just about to sleep, but we're still talking until one of us does not respond. And then we'll have, he always falls asleep. And I remember at some point we would be in our bed singing. Very bad notes, not good at all, but we had fun. So that brought us together. But we had this experience of being in the same room together all the time. They know, for example, I don't like milk in my tea. They will make the milk and tea with what's called here karak or chai latte. And I'll be the only one who's made like a regular black tea with no sugar. And everyone's, what's wrong with you? Because Sudanese people love sugar, right? They'll be like, what's wrong with you? You don't even take one sugar in your, and I'm just like, that's good. And they're like, this girl's weird. She thinks she's important. And they will say things like, they would say, you think you're a Hawaii means white person. Right?
I don't like milk in my tea, so maybe they're right.
There is this stereotype of the people who live in the West, right? And how they are brainwashed by the West. And then you come to the West and you're like, you're brainwashed by Islam. And I'm like, bro, just enjoy both cultures. I'm not brainwashed. So I just take what I love.
Yeah.
So yeah, here we are.
All right. I love that. And I love what you just said, because when I think of different cultures in the Muslim world, I do not think of what you're describing. I think of places where women are oppressed. They're not allowed to go to school. They can't even show their faces, only their eyes, and where they're in danger, where they're assaulted by men, where babies are sold for marriage and things like this. I know there's another side to it, but only because I'm aware. A lot of people are not aware in the West. And like you said, they're going to have a stereotype. So, what do you want people to know about the Muslim culture and Islam that they don't know?
I want them to know that there's a difference between the religion and the culture.
Mm.
The religion is very different from the culture. And by default, every religion comes to a culture, they're going to be a mix. And then some people are going to use the religion against them to oppress other people, right? So if anything, you need to seek the truth in every culture you go to, right? And what you just said about covering the eyes, covering everything, that's not part of hijab. That's called niqab, right? Some people do it as, let me address the elephant in the room, which is the word jihad. The word jihad is an Arabic word that means hard work. It doesn't mean killing.
Okay.
It means hard work, right? And the idea of some women covering even their face is called jihad because they're working hard to come up some sort of to like how would I say, they work hard within themselves, right, to achieve covering their face. Because what is covering your face? You're hiding your beauty, you're keeping your beauty to yourself, you're keeping some sort of identity to yourself. When you talk to someone, when I talk to a niqabi person, I don't see all of that, I only hear their thoughts. The only way I can associate their identity is with Islam and oppression. And they have such a big job to prove everyone wrong, right? So that's form of hard work.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. Even with me wearing a scarf. Now, if I took my scarf off, you're not going to know me.
I know. And I find myself wanting to see your hair. I don't know that you'll ever show me in my lifetime, but
I'll show you.
Okay.
I'll show you. And just to let everyone know, hijab is not like between women, we can show hair and usually choose the people that I'm comfortable with in terms of women. And another misconception is we sleep and dress and then shower with hair. A question I was asked is, are you bald? I said, nah. You can see there's something here. At least give me that.
That is funny.
It's funny.
There are questions that like a child would want to ask, and adults, we still have those questions a lot of times when we grow up.
Ask them.
So we should ask them of one another. Let's go back to the word jihad because it's a scary word for people in the West. A scary word. We think of it as terrorism. Not everyone. I'm not speaking for everyone, but
and you have
what's the difference? Why has that word become, I don't know, why do we think it's something dangerous if it's not?
Because it was portrayed that way. And okay, let's go back to the history. Okay. When jihad is mentioned in the Quran, it is mentioned in war.
Yeah.
It's not just only when mentioned hard work on yourself. Because we tend to say in Quran and Islam that self is your biggest enemy. That's something we all know. You need to work on yourself. You need to work on yourself to be the good person because we know in ourselves we have the good and the bad. So you're always hardworking, not to be a manipulative if you know how to do manipulation, right? Not to sell the bad stuff that like in every job, right? Not, in my job, not to judge the parents of my kids if they're overwhelmed and be like, you should do this to your child. That's form of jihad, right? Now, jihad in Quran, and I know a lot of verses have been quoted from Quran in a negative way, right? But if you look at the history in the world, everywhere there was war. Every country in the world had war, and Islamic countries and emperors throughout the history, if you read, they fought each other. They fought with Christian. The history is very rich. And in Islam is a lifestyle. Everything has a rule. So even jihad in war has rules. Like not to kill women, not to kill kids, not to fight in certain months, because we call them the holy months. In those months, for example, you don't go into war with anyone unless you're attacked. You defend yourself, right?
So what about situations where we've seen children killed, we've seen women raped, and we've seen terrorism happen?
Yeah.
That's
Of
not
course,
jihad. You're saying that's not jihad. That's something
that's a
else.
misuse.
That's
Interpretation of what's happening in the text, which happens everywhere. I can sit here and tell you, you know what, Mitzi, I think avocados are bad for you. What is my context here? You're not supposed to have a lot of potassium, and avocados have lots of potassium, so avocados are bad for you. That's the context. But did I explain myself? No. Right. So every text has a context to it. And they never finish the verse. Like every time.
Yeah. That's a very good point. And
but
there are people yeah, go ahead.
I just want to address that there is terrorism. And this terrorism is even toward us from our people. Sure. From Muslim, right? In Muslim countries, a lot of terrorist attack happens. Killing Muslim people. Yeah. Telling, for example, a woman who looks like me, who's in the media, telling her that she's showing her face, she should be killed. Yeah. I'm a Muslim person too. Sit down with me, tell me why do you think I shouldn't be showing my face, right? Why killing me? You know what? Right. And I think at some point when my friend were in med school after I left, it is advocating against FGM, which is female genital mutilation. Oh. Which is associated with Islam. Okay. It's not an Islamic practice. It has a history. It has a history, right? And you would see that FGM, while associated with Islam, you will see the cases more in Africa in comparison to places like what's called now Saudi Arabia, UAE, and all these places where Islam actually originated. You don't see that in countries in Asia, Muslim countries in Asia, which, by the way, for everyone listening, Muslims, the Muslim who are non-Arabs are more than the Muslim who are Arabs. And I know that Islam is associated with the Arab population, Middle East population. But if you look at those populations, you find Christian and Jewish. You find other religions that are not being addressed. It is not a geographical location. It is a religion that can be anywhere. Mexican Muslims. Yeah. Yes. Are you going to say to someone you're not Muslim because you're Mexican? Or you're not Muslim because you're, I don't know, you don't speak Arabic? No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. So what is happening here, and something I want to relate to your previous question about what I want people to know about Islam and the culture, the differentiation between the two. Yeah. And I want to pay a huge tribute to our men, because they're always portrayed as tough, those like uncaring, controlling. But I have my uncle, for example, who would cook for me because I had med school exams. That's not portrayed. That's why I want to make films that talk about me and my experience. You got my brother who at some point was carrying me because I was throwing up. You don't see these representation. You don't see what happened in mosques and masjids of the good practices that I see. Yeah. How we are. And the reason of hijab is identity. Is when I walk and there's another Muslim person, know that I'm Muslim. Is when something happened to me as a woman, there is a man there who's Muslim, or a group of Muslim men or women, know this is our girl. We need to stand up for her. It is identity. It's a connection. When I came here to Canada, and I wasn't aware, I'm not going to lie, when I wore hijab the first time, I wanted to be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when I came here to Canada, and I have another friend who's Muslim as well, and she was not wearing hijab. And I was the one wearing hijab. I'll be walking in Toronto. I see another Muslim girl, and she would say, Assalamu alaikum, and she would just smile. And the first time I was like, does she know me? Right? And then the first time I was like, am I that? Like, I just landed in this country. Am I beautiful? What's happening here? Of course I am. But anyways, I was thinking to myself, what's going on? Then I realized it's a pattern in recognizing ourselves and Muslim people and connecting together in a Western world that at some point it's hard for us as women to be there with our identity. So it's some sort of support That was so beautiful. And I kid you not, I would be walking with this friend who's not wearing hijab, right? And me, both are Muslim. And the other Muslim women would shake their head like, we know you, and salam alaikum. Some would be like, how are you, sister? And we'll be good. How are you? It would be like a 5-second interaction that's very beautiful and had this fuzzy, warming feeling in my heart. And my other friend was like, how do you know all of these women? I was like, I don't know them. I just joined.
Right.
I joined by existing as my identity in this country. And I know there are women around the world who are Muslim, who are being oppressed, who are being forced to wear hijab, who are being forced to get married at such young age. But so are others in other places who are being oppressed for other reasons, whether for their skin color, whether for where they are, like Native women here in Canada. There's so many variation of this oppression. And I hate that is associated with me without knowledge, without context.
Right.
I am willing to acknowledge it, but let's talk facts.
I appreciate what you're saying. I think there's a lot of stereotyping that's done in all kinds of walks of life.
Yes.
And why do we do it? I don't know, because we don't understand one another, because we have fears, because the media is trying to manipulate us. There are lots of reasons why, and it's for some bigger, more sinister purpose. I don't know. It's just, I love talking with you about it. Is happening. And I love talking with you about it, because even when I think about some of the ways that I've seen your very beautiful culture portrayed in a negative way, like, I know you would never do those things. I would never be afraid to be with you or come to your house and meet your family or anything like that. I just know that you're just a beautiful person. So I don't know. It's really interesting though. And I know it's a complicated thing, but I appreciate you being willing to talk about it and to let people know what's important, because it is very important to know, especially with things that are going on in the world. Yeah. And I do want to ask you a couple more questions. I want to go back to your story about when you said you saw God, and what you made me think about when you said that you thought of the light as the representation of what God was, the idea of light, the white light. That's exactly what I think God is. And I'm Christian. How do you explain that? That is God an essence of something that goes and transcends religion and religious text? What is God to you? And why do I think it's the same thing?
If you think it's the same thing, because it is.
Simple as that.
In Islam, you don't believe in Islam without believing in the previous texts, such as Bible and Torah. Yeah, it's one of the pillars. Or are they the pillars? The translation from Arabic to English is hard. So if I say it wrong, forgive me, my Muslim folks. But it's one of the main things. You have to believe in the previous prophets and texts to believe in Islam. And the word Islam, I know, again, in media, to clean the image, they say Islam is peace. But the word Islam comes from taslim, which means surrender. And for me, it is surrendering everything in you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the guidance. It's what's guiding me. And I feel when I was a child, thinking of light, that's where it was coming from. Because as a child, you're told to listen to God, to God's word, to learn God's word, to learn to pray, right? Because we pray 5 times a day. I see people fasting. Since we are in the holy month of Ramadan right now, I know this will air later, but we fast, right? We have things in Islam. They're very hard for people. That's why I said it's a lifestyle, like no intimate relationship with a partner before marriage. That's why we were portrayed as strict and what do you call it, backwards thinking, etc. What no one talks about is how hard are those things to achieve. How hard it is to love someone and wait till after marriage, right? Especially with how everything right now in the media is portrayed about love and relationships. And this is what is the norm. And what you're doing is against the norm, and you cannot control yourself, right? You have to go for this. It's the passion, right? Those things in Islam are hard to maintain. They're not easy. And the fact that it is portrayed as a strict thing that we just do, that's not true. We fight with ourselves every single day. It's a battle every single day to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know why we obey? It's out of love. You will start by obeying out of fear because you don't want to go to hell. Because you are told what hell is. And there's hell and heaven. And that's how it is even when you're raising a child. You tell a child you get the candy or you don't get the candy, right? So that's how the relationship start out of fear. Just like how you start your relationship with your father. Controlling figure, a power figure. And then you realize that it's your father and you love them separate. So stay away from the word father because I know there's a thing in Christianity about that too. But for us, Allah as an entity, we do not try to understand or determine or define because we think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as bigger, as something that the conscious mind, the human brain is not aware of. Just how we're not aware of what's happening beyond galaxies. We're not aware of that, right? So we try to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the text, through the feelings we have every day, through the fact that at some point in my life, I thought I'm going to die and I cried and I asked to be alive. And the next day, things went fine. The days where I didn't have money and I prayed for the money, right? The days where I was like, I want this in my life and it wasn't happening. And then 5 years later, I realized why it's not happening. Those are the things, they come together for me for understanding for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for me, it's just love. I worry about, sometimes I tell myself, maybe it's easier to live without my scarf. But then I'm like, but it's my connection. It's the identity I have right now. It's my anchor to pray 5 times a day. I meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 5 times a day. It's my anchor. I started at 13 and everyone was like, how are you keeping it? How are you so disciplined? I'm not disciplined. I am not. I love it. It's what keeps me sane. I need it. I don't do 5 times prayer because I have to do them. I do them because I need them. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need your prayers. If we agree that God created the world, prayers are not needed for God, right? They're for us. That's my understanding of God and Allah, that I love Allah. That's it. That's it for me. And the light was a child mind of understanding, of guidance, of love, right? Because we think of light as
it's love. It's love. That's what I would say too. And I'm not, when I say that I'm a Christian, I'm not like a practicing, very strict religious person at all. I'm very spiritual, but not religious. And I have studied lots of religions. I've studied Judaism, I've studied Buddhism, and I'm also into a lot of yoga. So there's a lot of the like Hindu culture in yoga. And so I just appreciate other people's interpretations of that light and what it means. And you just got to the heart of it, because really what it means for me is love. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I know that you are living as a person with a kidney transplant. So how does that affect you in your life today? I know that your prayers are probably a big part of how you manage.
It's an interesting relationship. Some days I just want to be healthy and thrive, and other days I appreciate that I have to slow down to think. I think of it as being put in, I would say timeout, but as a rest zone to reflect. Because at some point in my life, I was working and studying for 10 years continuously. This is when the kidney failure happened. So nowadays, it's what happened with the kidney transplant is it got me connected with my body.
Yeah.
It is hard for me to sit for longer hours. For prayers, I can't even do the full prayers where I'm standing and kneeling down. I need a chair. Even if I did 1 or 2, the rest of the 5 would be on a chair. And mind you, I'm a young person in my 30s. Just praying in a chair sometimes, the image is like, what are you doing? Are you just lazy? For example, when it comes to accessibility, when I go to places that offer a prayers room, which are not a lot in Canada, it's the fact that there's no chair and I ask for it. Sometimes I don't ask because I don't want to tell people. So some things I would discuss with organizers, always have a chair there. You don't know.
Yeah.
Some people look good, but they need it. So in my day-to-day life, there are some inaccessibility to things. In my work, I want to take more clients. I choose not to because I choose to reserve my energy. Some days I would wake up and I think to myself, my task is to edit my podcast, write those emails, connect with people, etc. I end up doing only one thing. And then things shift, right? And this sometimes associate when you're working and with people who you're working with laziness or procrastination. But the truth is, it's not any, it's just being tired easily in comparison, right? And again, just lately, yesterday, I was telling you we're doing the Muslim Literary Festival, and we're supposed to plan a hangout for all of us in person, and the times are not working for me because of that. And I might choose not to attend because I would choose myself first, right? So it is living with those choices and understanding those choices as much as I want to be part of things and that FOMO feeling, it is for me. So it's a day by day living. Also, there's a fact of doing the blood work every 3 months and with kidney transplant you can get a failure again. You live in this fear. It's in the back of your brain. Every time you do the test, which is every 3 months, for me this is my third year, you just sit down and wait. And I kid you not, till now, the moment I get the notification that I can access my results, and I just go, and the moment I see what is my kidney function is, thank God. And then I wait for the next time results. And I sometimes I get hyper focused on how I feel because I tell myself, I missed the signs before. Am I missing a new sign? Right. Sometimes I remember going to the doctor, telling him I sleep too much. Check out what's happening. And he was like, those are the medication side effects. There's also the medication, the fact that we take anti-rejection medications that have side effects on us. For me, it's gaining weight. For some people, it's losing so much weight, right? There's insomnia, hyperactivity. Sometimes you're too tired to leave the bed, and other days you cannot sleep. So it is the fact that you cannot predict how your next morning will be, and you have to live it like that. And I think this affects the people around you, your family. That's why I'm trying to write a book about the family of the family can and everyone around us to understand what we're going through before, during, and after the transplant. Because everyone thinks, you're healed. But you still live with a lot of things. You still, for example, cannot eat some foods because it will slow the work of your medications, because the medications are very important. I take 9 pills, 10 pills per day. These are important to maintain that your immune system at a level that won't reject the kidney. I live with this on every day. It's my everyday life. I have accepted it. I have accepted that sometimes people do not understand that. Sometimes people are going to judge me, pity me, think of me as less, don't want to work with me. I wouldn't say I have a kidney transplant if I'm in a work interview. I'll keep that to myself.
Yeah,
because
I would never disclose something like that.
Yes, because that's something now it's going out in the public. If I became
sorry.
famous.
Yeah. If you're going to hire Sabreen, she's doing
Please.
Great.
Please hire me.
She can do the job.
I can do the job. Don't worry. But yeah, I can do the job according to if I planned my day accordingly and be aware of the fact that things might happen to me at any moment, and I need to be ready for them. So it is dealing with that and dealing with consequences with people reactions. And that being said, I'm not being negative at people. There are amazing people out there who understand, who are supportive, who have amazing accommodations for us, right? Stuff like that. Yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about when it's come to the transplant, how it affects your relationships and everything else related to it. But it's a thing that you live by day.
Yeah. I think you represent kidney transplant people with grace and beauty. If I didn't know, I wouldn't know that you had had a kidney transplant, because
Thank you.
You just seem like a normal, beautiful person to me. And extremely smart and fun to talk to. Tell me, what are the biggest lessons you've learned in your life?
That's a good question. I'm
It's the
still learning.
Blessings podcast, so we need to talk about the blessings and the lessons.
Yeah, I'm still learning. That being said, I think for me is slowing down.
Mm.
That sometimes achieving is a plus, and not achieving is a lesson. What is everyone calling failure is not a failure. Starting over means you achieved the previous stage, like a game. And if you are very good at a level in a game and you are the top, the next level you'd be at the bottom. And maybe people around you won't know that. Like me coming here as an immigrant to Canada, people who are not aware might think, oh, she has an accent. She doesn't know how to do a bank transfer, not a bank transfer, anything related to the new system you're living in, because the new country. So you're coming from a different system, right? Everyone just who's ignorant would think that maybe I'm stupid. But to come to Canada, I have to be the elite in the previous community, right? I had to because that's how the immigration system works, for example.
Right, right.
Or you are a refugee who achieved so much where you are and lost it all and you're starting over, right? So just realizing and understanding that earns you point with people to talk to. And there's a book that I love, which is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. In one of the chapters, he talks about being in, I don't remember the name of it, but basically, this is a cell jail in which they sit in before they go to the court.
Okay.
And this is in South Africa, and everyone is being treated about how they look and where they belong. And even in the jail cell, there is some sort of status hierarchy, etc. Right? And then Trevor knows some dialect languages, is good at them with the English and everything. And you see a pattern of him using that talent to blend in because he has such a unique features. A man comes and he was scared. He was just a teenager who got there by accident. He did something, and it's a really interesting thing. And he didn't want to call his mom because he didn't want his mom to know. It's a funny story. So he's sitting there holding his ground, trying not to get assaulted or anything that happens in jail cells. And then walks a very big guy with tough features, right? And no one understand him. No one understand the language. And I don't want to mispronounce any language name or what was the language, so I'm not gonna say. But Trevor spoke that. So he basically, and the guy looked very tough, very like big guy and tough and all, and everyone just took aside from him. And Trevor just went to him because he thought this guy can protect me, right?
Yeah.
And I speak his language, and everyone is scared of him. And he said, the moment I spoke his language, is the moment his features softened. The moment that this big, huge guy who scared everyone, is the moment that the big guy sighed in relief that someone understand him. And he said when he sat and talked with him, it turns out he came for some small debt. He's just a father, such a soft hearted individual, a father who got in trouble because he's trying to maintain the house and he's very worried about his house. And he tells you about this guy who, at the beginning of the chapter, you were like, what did this person do? Big, tough, etc. And then that earned him points in the jail cell by being with him, and you listen to the story and what happened later, and that stuck with me. It stuck with me because I lived in many places and I changed schools, and every time I'm the new person who's everyone trying to figure out to either isolate or have as a friend. And the first time I went to new school was different from right now if I went to new school, because I learned many skills. So I think this is one of the things that I want people to understand or like a blessing, is that, and we say at the beginning, to approach people from a plain point of understanding and just be there for who you are and see the other person for who they are. And that's why I have conversations, right? Because I love this. I love getting to know people, because the more I know, the more I learn, right? And everything is just a human experience. So
Absolutely.
surrender to that. Surrender to it and let go of your ego, because no matter how great you are or the things that you don't have, you think others are going to use against you. That's not the truth.
No.
That's just in your brain. That's what your ego tell you. So surrender.
Yeah.
That's my
Surrender
biggest.
to the human experience and what it actually is, not
Yes.
what the outside world is telling you it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is
Yes.
a beautiful lesson. And what about your blessings? What are you grateful for?
Where do I start?
Ah,
I'm a very blessed person.
yeah.
So I think the biggest blessing I have in my life was my grandmother. May her soul rest in
Mm,
peace. Her
mm,
love and her standing her ground, her beauty, and her showing by example. She never said pray, she prayed. She never said love someone, respect someone, she respected.
mm,
Right? She never said something I love from her. I don't do a lot is painting nails. She loved painting her nails. She
oh,
loved wearing heels at that age. And everyone was like, what are you doing? You're too old for this. And she was like, she just did it. She just did it. Right. So I have a huge, great appreciation for having this character in my life. Right. And for her love and for her trust in me. She would always say, this is, she never questioned me the times I questioned myself. And she raised me very well. So I'm grateful for her. I'm grateful for my parents' divorce.
mm,
Yes, I'm grateful for it. It made me who I am today, right? It showed me not to judge a book by its cover, not to judge by status, to look
mm,
beyond appearances, beyond people's stories about people, to
mm,
seek the real story. It taught me a lot because I got misunderstood a lot. I got pitied a lot. And I wish that someone would actually hear the truth, not the divorce portrayed in movies, right? I am grateful for my siblings. This is my one of my biggest blessings because they allowed me to go to be a good older sister. And sometimes they say I'm controlling, but I'm okay with that. They tease me, they love me, and I love them back. They were like the biggest supporters during my kidney transplant, right? Their love for me in any form give me a foundation to not be deprived of love, right? Because some people are, and I'm privileged enough to have all this love in my life. I'm grateful for my parents as well, for their experience showed me what I'd be looking for. Their trust in me, I would say, because they always let me make my own choices. They were aware that I have this soul that is so free.
yeah.
I remember my dad at some point asking me to do something, and I said, "Why would I do that?" And he said, "Because I'm your father, and you should listen." And I said, "No, I'm not going to listen because of this reason." And I think this is the time where, again, portraying Muslim men, this is the time where he sat down with himself, realized what kind of daughter he has,
Yeah.
was like, let's restructure this and talk to
Mhm,
this girl because she's stubborn as he is. I
mm,
have his character, right?
mhm,
So grateful for that. And I'm grateful for my kidney transplant, the kidney failure. That experience was tough, but it taught me that pain is fine, crying is fine, being
mm,
vulnerable and telling my story, telling the honest truth, being in tune with my body because I neglected it for so long. And I'm brave enough to say that I did, loving my scars, looking in the mirror and seeing that I have three or four scars in my belly. I have a scar here for my thyroid removal. So many scars that I look at them and I think they're beautiful. And finding beauty in scars is not easy for a woman. So I'm grateful for that. And not the last thing I'm grateful for, but having good friends like you.
I know. So glad we became
Support
friends.
me.
You
Me
are
too.
so just insightful, and some of the things that come out of your mouth, they're mind-blowing. I've got so many wonderful nuggets from this conversation. I'm going to pull out quotes. You got so many things that you say. They're just so wise and very beautiful. And
Mm.
like I said, you don't go in for small talk. I don't like small talk either.
I don't know how
And
to
so
do them.
I know I don't either. I'm like the weather. Yeah, it's
It
nice.
exists.
Right.
Or your favorite color. Someone
Right.
asked me recently, what is your favorite city you've lived in? I said, I don't play favorites because any favorite you play at some point you'll be ripped off.
Mm,
Because for me, a city is where I meet people
mhm,
and every circumstances around that can change anytime, and I can pull myself and be with other people or other cities, etc., just the way I am. So the moment I feel uncomfortable in a place, doesn't mean uncomfort to the point where I ghost the place and I cut ties and that toxic thing, but just loving myself enough to know it's the time to move on. Right. Same thing with colors. I could love black today, tomorrow it's red.
Yep.
Right?
I'm exactly like that too. I don't like to be married to one thing for too long, literally and figuratively.
Hence, I'm
On
single.
that note, I know.
On that note.
Oh my gosh. All right. And I know you wanted to just mention that a couple of things. I know your big project with the Toronto Muslim Literary Festival is coming up. So
Yes.
we'll have the information about that in the show notes. That's a wonderful annual event that's beginning, and Sabreen is co-directing the marketing for that event. And also, I'd like to end with sending out prayers to the people of the Sudan who are suffering right now. And so, if you'd like to lead us in some sort of a prayer or something we can send to them, that would be wonderful.
I honestly want to send prayers and love and support for the people of Sudan, Sudanese people, for their resistance, love for their identity, for their fight through the years to maintain who they are, to love their country. They're so strong because I'm the one who left seeking other opportunities. It pains me as a Sudanese person that they're going through this. It pains me that as a family, we lost the family house I was just telling you about. As a Sudanese person, I cannot visit my grandmother grave anymore at this point as this is being aired, right? So I just want to send my love and my appreciation and admiration for this nation. I want to acknowledge that there is a lot of pain happening in the world that is teaching us a lot, starting by the fact we are living in a native land as well. We're occupying it. So grateful for all of you and admire you all. I send you all my love and prayer and hope for a better world that can fit us all in peace. Thank you.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabreen.
You're welcome. I am so happy. I love this conversation very much. I love you. You know that,
I know.
right?
I love
Come to
you.
Toronto.
I will. I'll have to come back to Toronto.
Come for the literary festival on June 8th. Is
Oh,
going to have a lot of Muslim writers, aspiring Muslim writers who wants to bring their experience in writing forward, because it is an underrepresented community at the moment. The conversation we had today, it's important to show people for who they are. Doesn't
right.
matter what they are. Just show them for who they are and let the
Right.
mass decide.
Yeah. Well, also, we're individuals.
Yes.
Like everyone is an individual. And so we should remember that when we're talking to one another.
Yes.
All
Thank you,
right.
Mitzi. This
Thank
was
you,
amazing.
Sabreen. Thank
You're welcome.
you.